All right, so there was a blog post I wrote a while back documenting how it works. So I'll give a bit of a summary. Since I first joined ComfyUI, like doing stuff, custom nodes and crap in July of 2023, one of the things I was most excited about that Auto 11 supported was masking LoRas, where you can have a LoRa apply in one region and not another, and it sort of just worked there. And when I moved to Comfy, I was like, man, these nodes are great. I'm sure, the weight stuff will just kind of work there too. Unfortunately, that just wasn't a thing. And that was my original plan of what I wanted to do in ComfyUI. AnimateDiff just came by accident. The original implementation was very close to working, which annoyed me. So I made it fully work and it took off, and that distracted me from my real goal, which was the LoRa masking. So this past summer, I got working AnimateDiff evolved. And then as part of my contract with ComfyOrg, I was able to port that over to work natively with everything in ComfyUI. So one of the things that has worked since me first using ComfyUI was being able to mask prompts, where you say, hey, in this region, I want to have this prompt. And in this example, we can do sandy beach with umbrella, cloudy sky, or whatever. So we're going to hide the actual cool stuff, and we'll just make it do the masking. So this worked since I first started using ComfyUI. So this isn't new. So the prompt is different, but it still uses the exact same weights for both halves of the image. So it doesn't do anything special. My contribution was making it possible by adding the infrastructure where the weights will change alongside the conditioning when it does the sampling. So in this case, I had some I do a pixel art LoRa on this half of the image and nothing special on the other half. So when I run it, the left half of the image should now look like pixel art. And it does. And the art still uses the original model. And on top of that, a LoRa is technically, the difference between the new weights and, the original weights, and that's how it gets applied. It's a difference. Well, you can do the same thing with a normal model, where I treat a different model as a LoRa itself. So this is originally sort of like a cartoon anime model, but let's say I want to only give it, half the strength, and I just connect the hook there, and that's it. I don't have to do anything. Then I just click run. And now it will use that other model at half strength here. So it becomes slightly more realistic, but it's not very obvious. Let me make it super obvious by just going 100% on the strength. And the mask doesn't have to be binary. It can be a granular thing. So you can see this has become to look very realistic. Well, this is all pixely, but you can change the mask to be a gradient instead. And since ComfyUI supports batching images and masks, this also works for AnimateDiff because you can have multiple masks, different gradients on each one or whatever you want. So you can control the actual weights used there. So as you can see, realistic, very gradual change to the pixel art. This was my sort of very basic example. Part of the community, I guess, what they also wanted to see at the time was, a lot of people do character LoRas and anime style stuff. So I have a demo for that too. Here's actually 12 LoRas, 4 LoRas for each of the characters seen. And they are all 3 different anime characters with distinct styles. And it just works. So that's the quick demo of that. It works for all models that work in ComfyUI. And the more exciting part, because I know there's some people making custom nodes in the room, the more exciting part was the infrastructure I added to actually make this possible. Because you have to think, okay, I want to apply these weights when it's dealing with this particular conditioning. Naturally, the engineer that I am, I was like, okay, how can I bring this to its natural conclusion? And so the hook system that exposed here doesn't support weight hooks. It can support executing custom code while it deals with that thing. So you can have custom code, custom things happen only on when particular conditioning is being executed. And it just works. I also added wrappers and callbacks where instead of trying to monkey patch an existing function in ComfyUI and then trying to wrap around it and hoping, crossing your fingers, the interface doesn't change by accident and everything breaks. Wrappers are now supported natively, where you, on the model patcher, you say, hey, I want to add this wrapper. Here's the function that you execute when this other function runs, which can wrap around it. So for example, now that's how I made AnimateDiff evolve and now work with all sampler types. So for example, you have the normal K sampler, which has very basic settings. You have the custom K sampler. Oops, custom K sampler. What's it called? There we go. There's an advanced one. It's called sampler custom. That's why I couldn't find it. And beforehand, technically, they all ended up in the same place, like code-wise, but you couldn't like make one patch that would work for all three at once. You'd have to finagle, and this one was very hard to get working. And that's a pain as a developer. So now you can add a wrapping function that will run at the common point of all three. So I don't need to have 3 different sets of code to make sure that no matter what backend someone uses for the sampler, all the patches, the wrappers will apply. And the other thing, callbacks, is like, oh, when this function gets called, like the pre-run on model patcher, it will then execute whatever functions you want in case you have more setup, and then it will run cleanup when it's done running. So it just makes that more seamless. It's hard to demo that here because it just sort of works in the background, but I'll be working on documentation for all the internals of the hook stuff because I was able to remove like 1,000 lines from AnimateDiff evolve because I no longer had to hack around stuff, and it no longer breaks every other ComfyUI update, which is great. Any questions about the hooks? Other things related to it?
Kosinkadink, not a question for you. I just wanted to say I really appreciate this implementation. I've been using basically this exact workflow since December 5th, I think, which is like day 0 when Comfy shared it with me. So yeah, I love this one, and I've done some really neat stuff with it. So yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. This is something I've been wanting to be in Comfy and just work for like a year and a half. So
yeah, my only request next for this one is if we can figure out how to go from like the binary regions to actual like zoning, and obviously I'm sure there are much smarter people that can build out something, much smarter than me that can build out something like that. But I've always thought that as opposed to just like a gradient, a varying width, why it would be super amazing if we could specify actual regions like with regional prompter, or even just beyond like simple boxes and circles and things. But yeah, thank you so much.
When you say regions, like what do you mean specifically?
So I just envision like just defining a region somehow, more than just like a gradient. So as it stands right now, the way I'm working with it, it's like slightly different here. So I'm using the binary. I can't remember the exact name, but you basically specify, the different regions of the image, rather either horizontally or vertically, and then you can specify the thickness of the blur. And so what you have here is just basically like a simple gradient, but you can, go a lot further than that. And so I just imagine if you could say like, oh, I want to work in the upper left corner, or I want.
You can do it. Yep, you can just make a mask that looks like that, and you're good.
Oh, okay, yeah. So masking. All right.
There's a couple of custom node packs. I can't think of what they are off the top of my head that have like some pretty complex compositing packs and stuff.
Cool.
And then you could also bring that in from any other program.
Yeah. And the way. Sorry to interrupt. The way I implemented this, it's using the original like masking that ComfyUI supported, and a lot of the nodes, whether they are tiling, diffusion, or like detailing, they're aware of that mask, and they usually like modify it. And this will just work with that mask, assuming they take care of it. Because my goal was to make it as like pain-free. Like I don't want to add a new feature and be like, okay, the only way you can really use this is if all custom nodes change. So if a custom node could handle the way Comfy was doing conditioning masking before, it should work out of the box with all the weight stuff, assuming they didn't like re-implement some of the original code. And if they did, they should reach out to me. I can try to make that be a less painful process in terms of not needing to copy and paste code from the original repo. And
Cool.
another thing that ComfyUI supports is setting an area where instead of a mask, you just tell it. And this should also just work.
Yeah, that definitely. I think that's a pretty straightforward implementation. I appreciate you guys opening my mind. Sometimes, I'm sure everyone has realized that, when you have just like this infinite variety of tools at your disposal, it's easy to just forget, oh yeah, I can just draw a mask and load it in.
Yeah.
The thing that I want to do. So I've just been doing the binary region.
You know about the masking here that's built in,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
So it's a little wonky. I know
Yeah.
that they're trying to maybe improve at some point, but that is solid.
Cool.
Yeah,
Thank
my
you.
goal was like, I was like, hey, I want to have as much utility for this as possible. You can have gradients, you can have regions, you can have batches of masks. So each individual image, or if it's a video, each individual frame could have slightly different application of the weights.
Hey, if you don't mind, can I connect with you at some point? Because honestly, I feel like I have a good understanding of this workflow, but at the same time, it just feels like there's maybe some just 10% further that I could get some clarity on.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Cool.
Yeah. Any more questions about the hooks and the weights? Sorry, hooks and stuff like that. Because I have something else to demo if there is no more questions.
Excited to read the documentation for that as well in the future.
Yep,
Yeah.
I want to make sure that is written pretty
Okay.
well. It's well enough that someone can actually utilize it. You can technically do the classic ComfyUI thing where you look in the source code and you read the vibes of how the code is written to reuse it. But I'd like to make some like very simple example nodes, which even they could do something as simple as, hey, when you get to this code, I print something in the console, just so you have a starting point where how that whole thing works.
Debug hook node or something, maybe.
Yeah, I made some test nodes that I could like show, the hooks printing, either specifically for the conditioning and stuff like that. But I want to have those be somewhere in a public space in an organized fashion for ComfyUI in general. All right, any more questions about the hooks and masks? We can also ask questions later about it. That's cool too. I'll take that as a note, so I will continue with the next thing. Currently, while I was, either this whole conference that happened last year or when I was in Japan earlier this fall, one of the things I was asked by a few people was, is there ever going to be, multi-GPU support, whether to accelerate or to like divide the, the weights so that if you don't have enough VRAM. And so I've messed with ComfyUI enough so that I've messed with every single bit that thing would require. So for the past few weeks, I've been working on multi-GPU support. And so I can demo, and this will be, I can actually just demo it, because actions speak louder than words after all. So this is running on the PC that's in the back here. It has two 3090s on it. You can see the little lights flashing. So currently we'll just run it on one GPU. Ignore the masked out nodes. So we have this is the default ComfyUI Galaxy bottle prompt. And let me pull up where's the log? Toggle bottom panel, there we go. If I run this.
Hey, Kosink, you might be sharing, you're still sharing the AnimateDiff one.
Oh, thank you for the warning. Because it's shared specifically the tab, not the browser, which is confusing. Let me change that. It should be okay. I think you should be able to see it now.
Yeah, here we go.
All right, so this is just a normal Galaxy bottle prompt. On one 3090, I'm running at a big resolution to really stress out the GPU to kind of show what it can do when being put to the limit. For one 3090, it's about 1 iteration per second. Then for my multi-GPU approach, by default, what it will do is it will take the conditionings that are being used here, in which case you have a positive and a negative, and it will just copy the models and then run each conditioning on a separate device. So it can happen at the same time. So I've increased the max GPUs to 2. So there's no other thing to change in configuration or anything, just change the number if you want to use multi-GPU. And then you press run. It has 2 models, and now it will have about a close to a 90% uplift in performance. So the more stressed the GPU is, the higher performance you'll get. So if you have, I don't know why you'd have to like, why'd you invest in 2 like lower performing GPUs? But if you did, it would be much easier to get the full scaling of that benefit. And I also had someone in the community who they have this monstrosity of a rig with 6 3090s in it. And so we did a little stress test. And basically, when we had enough conditioning to use every single GPU, 6 GPUs gave a slightly higher than 5x performance benefit compared to using just 1 GPU. So the scaling averages out to like 83% per GPU, depending on the workflow. For AnimateDiff currently in my prototype stage also works. I can actually showcase that too. Let me just, did I save the workflow? Probably not. Oh no, I did, thanks. All right. So here is just a little glass bottle. These prompts do nothing. This was a stress test that I sent to that one user for testing. This is only 2 cons. And we'll give it 1 GPU to give a little example. Let's make sure there's no context. We're not waiting forever. And there it goes, about 1.3 iterations per second. We'll should give it less steps. How's everyone's day going? This is 3090. The funny thing about the 3090, actually, I won't spoil it because it's a little sad for the poor old 3090. So I don't want to.
No, let's hear it. I have a 3090.
So this is 13090, 1.25 iterations per second. And here's the animation. I'm not sure why the little hot dog in there. Let's do 2 GPUs, so it'll be split. And I just realized I may have broken the code at some point. I was working on actually, let's do live debugging. Let's cancel current run. I am guessing I'm getting control nets to work currently. I may have broken AnimateDiff evolved at some point. But the performance that should be gotten, this is a live. Actually, no, this is about accurate. It's going to shoot about 2.1 iterations per second. The sad part for the 3090s is that my 14090 in my main PC is more than twice as fast as the 3090. The 2 3090s together still aren't as fast as my 14090 alone. So that goes to show, NVIDIA did, they pulled up for the 4090. Okay, they like whatever you want to say about the price, like at least the performance is there.
I'm excited to upgrade to the 5090 in like 7 days. I'll definitely be trying to get one.
Yeah, fingers crossed. The performance uplift there is more than the gaming benchmarks have shown so far. That was the same. Yeah, that was the same thing with the 4090. The 4090 isn't that big of an uplift from the 3090 sometimes, but it's more than twice the performance when you actually put it, stress it out in AI workflow.
Unfortunately, I think that the numbers, the benchmarks are true. I feel like Moore's law is hitting hard right now. It's like the power is 150% greater than the 4090. The card is smaller, but the gains are just not really as much as we'd like them to be. But it's a beautiful card, and definitely would be nice for anyone who gets one. Oh, it's gonna be solid, yeah.
And I've heard running models at a lower quantization.
Yes.
It's the optimization is like not exponential, but it scales nicer there.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And for the way I'm handling the multi-GPU stuff here is currently by default, it splits out the cons. So if you have only 2 conditioning, or let's say you're doing some LCM stuff and your CFG is 1.0, which means it only cares with the positive prompt, there's no negative prompt. And in that case, this, it can't speed it up because there's no conditioning to do. But for AnimateDiff, you have contexts. And this node here basically sets things up so you have the initial copied models to reuse. So in my AnimateDiff Evolve, I can use this feature I'm adding to native ComfyUI, and then saying, hey, instead of doing whatever you're going to be doing with the conditioning, use, here are my contexts. And then you can put separate contexts on different GPUs and get a speed up there. I don't have any performance numbers for that yet. Based on the conditioning, it should be about the same scaling. So if people are getting to the point where like, hey, AnimateDiff, it's great. I just wish I could make it go faster. I have, I either have the equipment or I have the rentals. I have the rental capacity to like rent a server somewhere with more GPUs. I want to make that possible. You can actually make use of it. And of course, I want it to just work. In this case, I broke something while trying to make control nets work yesterday. So I was probably with the unloading thing. But it is the scaling is much better than I anticipated. I originally thought maybe 1.5 because it's not even okay. Going to technical stuff, it's not using multiprocessing. It's using just torch threading, which because of the GIL thing, it can't use more cores than you initially have access to with Python. So it's usually like single core stuff. But because the GPU is taxed so heavily, doesn't really matter. When you're at the point where you want to accelerate your thing with more GPUs because you're being so like slowed down, like it just doesn't matter. And it works. When it works with all models. So it includes Cosmos. Cosmos has a positive and negative prompt. So with 2 GPUs, the scaling for Cosmos was like 1.8. So you can do, for example, for a test I did, one 3090 took 27 minutes to render. Two 3090s took, I believe, 15 minutes. So it was not quite 2x scaling, but like 1.8, 1.85. So some of those models grow. If people have access to more than one GPU, that'll be something they can do. And the other big multi-GPU thing that's not being worked on yet, but it is in my plans, is to make it possible to split the weights between devices. Because let's say you have 2 12-gigabyte cards, right? For whatever reason. I know this is probably not the majority of people, but let's say you do. And you're like, man, it would be great if I could like not worry about CPU offloading and instead have one GPU will always keep track of these weights and then basically passes on the in-progress thing to the other GPU and it has the other weights already loaded, ready to go. So, it should be about the same. It is something that's possible. It's just a lot of bookkeeping. I don't think it will be something that will just work the same way the acceleration does, but I think some users will like that, especially since it's less for acceleration. It works the best when your GPUs are about the same speed in terms of sampling. Otherwise, you have to make sure you push the faster one harder than you do the weaker one, because otherwise the slower one will be your weak link. While with weight splitting, you could have like, oh, I have this fast card with 12 gigs. I have this slower card with 6 gigs. Since less of the model would have to be on the slower card, you'll still get some performance penalty because the card will do the weights slower as it does it. But it should be still much faster than offloading to CPU and having to keep on switching the weights between that. That's currently what's in progress. Timeline for the acceleration. This weekend, I should have an initial pull request ready for ComfyUI Core. And then it would be great for anyone who has access to more than one GPU to just test stuff out. Figure out, hey, which node packs currently do not work out of the box with it. Then I can jot it down, reach out to them, see if there's any easy things that can be done to just make it supported. Yeah, so that's about it for this feature. I know not the most I guess impactful in terms of the number of people that can use it, because you obviously would need more than one GPU, but it'll be just something that you can just do in ComfyUI without a problem.
Nice. Well, thanks. Yeah, thanks for the demos. We're about 30 minutes in. I want to get going. Do you have another one, or should we go into the Q&A session?
We can go into Q&A.
Okay, cool. Okay, so maybe we'll start with the question around helping people get into the Comfy ecosystem. That's something that we talked a little bit about before, right? So we showed all this cool stuff. A lot of people in the room are advanced users of Comfy, and we're talk shop. So for people who are watching this, or for folks who are just getting into Comfy, what are some advice you have? What are some resources that people should start to check out and learn?
I'd say just look. Sometimes it's good to see what someone else does. So if you can try to look up like some YouTube video. I can't think of any like good tutorials top of my head. I'd say start simple, because as you look at some of the tutorials out there, they start using nodes which are like doing unorthodox things, and it could give you an impression that this is like how things usually work in ComfyUI. And so, you'll get kind of whiplash from, from some of the differences between how one node pack does it versus another. So I like find the most basic example. The ComfyUI README has examples for doing some of the simple things. So I'd say start there and slowly build a little intuition for how, what is conditioning, when do you need to load a model, what is a VA, when do you use it? And as you kind of play around with that, then you can be like, okay, I have a question about this one particular thing. And then you can try to like look that up and then build it that way. Because if you start with nodes, some of these workflows are going to be like, 100 nodes big. And that's not a good starting workflow. You don't want to deal with it. They could have some like custom nodes which like hide the node connections for beginners. If a workflow does that, you don't want to look at it. It'll just confuse you, because it's more of like a power user thing that some people like. Me personally, I like the noodles. I like to, I can just see what it's doing. If someone sends me something to debug and I see there are no noodles there because they're using like, nodes, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna spend the next 3 minutes actually connecting the noodles so I can see what they're trying to do. Yeah, I will say that's one of the one of the biggest pain points in ComfyUI currently is it's hard to like initially get into because all the technical stuff is thrown in your face. Your first time, you don't even know much about AI, and suddenly, it's like, oh, by the way, don't forget to put in your latents. And it's like, well, what's a latent? So that's a bit of a rough thing. So currently now it's like limit how much you're looking at once. Start with an image generation. Okay. Oh, now I want to do like multiple images. How does that work? Oh, I want to see these video models. How does that work? It's like, oh, is there? I'm being very annoyed at this node being kind of prickly. Is there something better that and then you can kind of build from there. Otherwise, it'll be very intimidating.
Yeah, for sure. Curious, how did you personally get started with Comfy?
I got into ComfyUI because I was originally using Auto 11, and I was like, hey, this is great, but if I want to do something custom and the extension that does that doesn't quite do it, there's no way to really like modify or tweak it without modifying code. And I was getting annoyed by my little personal custom code changes getting broken every like 2 weeks in Auto 11 at the time. I'm sure it's a lot more stable in terms of releases, but at the time it was annoying. And I was like, man, even this video stuff like AnimateDiff, it would be like, it would make a lot more sense if I could just do it, in a node way rather than hoping the extension author at some point fixes their problems in Auto 11. And yeah, so that's how I started. I like to say that I am partly spite driven, where if something annoys me and it's like, it's like I bet, with enough time, like I could like fix that, because and then that kind of what drove me initially. Like I did not know how like sampling worked. I did not know the ins and outs of diffusion as I do now. So my first project being AnimateDiff was very rough. I remember it was like 16 hours a day. I just like work on it. Then I go to sleep. I have a distinct memory of having a dream where this is a very dumb dream, that someone messaged me on Discord how to solve the problem I was dealing with. Then I woke up and there was a Discord message. However, it was like asking like how to install Comfy, and I was like, well, this is not gonna help me. But the person in my dream said to look at the memory management or something, and it was kind of right. So I don't know. I was cooking it in my dreams, I guess.
You should've just said
That's how I got it.
us.
Yeah, I did the meme of dreaming in code, I guess, except it was not even coding, just like a dumb idea I had in my dream.
How long did it take you to build the first version, the first AnimateDiff node?
So originally there was like I remember I started working on it. It was like beginning of July. I was like, okay, I'll start working on this. Then someone kind of beat me to the punch, and they had an initial version for ComfyUI. However, it was basically copy and pasting everything that was in Auto 11. So like they were kind of in the same place as me, where they were still kind of learning as they went. They didn't quite understand how like attention worked between how Auto 11 did it and ComfyUI, and how ComfyUI has like more efficient ways of doing it. And so I slowly was like, okay, this sort of works, but it's kind of broken. The images flickers. There's obviously something wrong with how it was ported over. And so I was kind of like going down these rabbit holes. Okay, where could this mistake be? And I eventually found them all, and then had my working fork of that. And the original developer, we haven't ever spoken like from the original guy who made the thing, but he started copying and pasting my changes from my fork into his. Not even like pulling the commits, just like copying and pasting. He once wrote a comment, "Oh, Kosinkadink fixed this," but it was like, I would work on the feature for like a week, and then 12 hours later, he'd have this pretty README in his version of the code where like, "Oh, here's how you use this feature." I was like, I do that too if I had the time. I was a little busy. And so we never like talked directly, and I was just a little miffed. So I was like, bro, this is GitHub. Just like make a, just be like, hey, I merge your commits into my thing. And then one of the cool ideas they had was like, let's see how the things work now, where you just basically patch the existing model with the additional modules to do the temporal stuff. And I was okay, they're cooking. So I was like, but it didn't quite cook enough. It was like it didn't clean up after itself. So like if you had like another one of these, which was going to normal image sampling, if this one ran before the image sampling would also try to do the video sampling. And so I worked out how to deal with ComfyUI's system and leave the right breadcrumbs. He gave up on it. Like in his version of the code, he like basically made it so you have to use a particular K sampler he made. I'm sure he's a great guy, but we could have collaborated a lot more, and I feel like we just didn't. But that's how it came about, and basically all the backend now is completely different than how it was originally.
Okay, did not know there was the backstory, but
that was the backstory. I'm sure he's a cool dude, but man, I was miffed. I was like, bro, just like merge my commits. It's GitHub.
It's true. Like everybody's working on this for free. Everyone is
like honestly, if he did that, and I became like a maintainer on his side of things, like on his repo, I might not even like have been into ComfyUI as much as I am now. So it's kind of like a butterfly effect of that one decision to not merge my commits directly and just copy and paste my changes.
There you go. Best way to learn is trial by fire.
But I don't want to shit talk him. I'm sure he's a great guy. Like it's not like we were both like some big ComfyUI experts. We were both beginners at the time. So like no big deal.
Nice. I want to pass it over to the room. Anybody has any questions for Kosink? Can be anything.
How's the weather in New York?
Terrible cold. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I'm in Kansas City. We had that big snowstorm a couple weeks ago. We got like a foot of snow. That was fun. I know it's New York. You guys get a lot more snow than that, but like it was unusual for Kansas City. So
where do you live in Kansas City? I'm from KC.
Yeah, I'm in KCMO. Like in the I don't want to dox myself. I'm in Kansas City, MO. Northish, Kansas City. If you're in the area, you know what I mean.
I'm a KCK guy, so yeah, fun stuff.
Yeah.
Technical questions? Oh yeah.
Yeah, considering the new look, the masking LoRa's, I just want to see an example of like applying that to a video, like video to video.
Sure, I can actually cook one up right now. Hopefully I didn't break everything in my code. Actually, I'll just go back to my 4090. It's not using multi-GPU there. That'll be a lot more clean. Okay, cool. All right, so we can do the example here where it does the different prompts. Let's add in AnimateDiff. I'm gonna use the Gen 2 stuff. Model. Apply AnimateDiff model. Load. Let's use V3, why not? Okay. We will make the resolution something quick, so we're not waiting forever. Let's do that. AnimateDiff usually works better if like the areas aren't like super different in the same frame. We'll do, let's see. I believe KJ Nodes has some special things for generating masks. Let's do gradient. To float, create a gradient mask. Okay, let's see what might be gradient or fade that we need. Preview, image, whatever. Oh yeah, another thing I'll be working on soon is porting over some like very basic nodes to ComfyUI core, like previewing a mask. That should be a built-in feature, right? Like that's gonna be a thing. Convert mask to image. Okay, let's make that go. And I think we may do fade. Let's do fade mask. Gradients might work, but it might be a little iffy. Let's see what happens here. Let's do 16 of them. Cool. Okay, so this is going to be a group of masks we use. So we're just going to pass that in to where we would normally put in our mask. We're going to increase this to 16, so it works with AnimateDiff. Okay, we have the model loaded. We have the prompts. So now it'll basically transition from this prompt with those weights to this prompt with those other weights. And let's see if it works. Ignore this. This is what happens if you run AnimateDiff with one frame. I remember answering a lot of GitHub issues about it. Like I'd get something like, I'd see this, their app was like, hey, by the way, you may want to bump your latent count up. All right, it's going, and hopefully, oh, this is gonna be safe. This is gonna not look like a video at all. Let me open up video combine. And here we go. Okay, let's actually make it play as a video though. Let's see if it's actually doing the thing. So it's going from more pixely to more realistic with this pattern. With the whole frame. And we can try to do the gradient just for an example purpose, where it's going to look like this. Yeah, let's just do it right now. I'll just copy this so we can compare the two results. Fade. Let's do gradient. Okay. I should probably just do it like that. Yeah. Okay. So now if you rerun it, we'll see how it, from my initial testing, AnimateDiff is not happy if like there's a substantial difference in the weights that are being used to sample it. But it's a bit of a hit or miss situation. But we'll find out if it's happy now. I'm glad we're doing this on the 4090. If it was on the 3090, it would be waiting for twice as long. Okay, it's sort of, it's trying, it's doing its best, but I think it's the initial look of the first frame, I think is like keeping the, actually no, never mind, because the way this works is it should be pixelated on the left and then get less pixelated as it goes on.
Do you still have it at half strength?
Let me check. Nope, it's at full strength now.
Hmm.
But so it is doing the realism thing, but we can make this more obvious if we just flip where the hooks are. So the pixels will be here, realism will be there. There we go. Because even the initial starting mask, as you can see, it's already faded. So the pixels would only appear here. So we'll have it go from a realistic style to a pixel style. And that should hopefully be more obvious. Okay, let's see how it's going.
You said video.
And here it comes. Let's see what that ends up looking like. Yeah, I think it's issue I saw where because it works on all the frames in the context at once, because initially as it starts sampling, it's on a particular style, it carries over that to the next frame a little bit. And because we're trying to shift it from going from pixely to realistic, there are some areas of the image where you can see it does it. Oh wait, never mind. I'm dumb. It is actually doing it. It goes from not very pixelated here to more pixelated as it goes on.
Yeah.
So never mind. I still had in my head it was doing the opposite. So it is sort of working. It'll be hit or miss.
It works even better with more frames, I found. Like, I'm not saying you should do that now. Just
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if there are multiple contexts, it has time to be like, okay, in this context, these frames, they won't influence that part of the animation as strongly. But if one context, as you see here, it's sort of doing it. But I think because this is gray, it's really the whatever math the weights do, it really works out to actually be more of the pixelated look than the realistic look. Because it does start looking realistic here and then becomes distorted to look pixely. So it's doing what it is, but I think just whatever the internal values of this gray here are not optimal and would probably have to be tweaked to actually work as intended with AnimateDiff. But yeah, we have fade masks and gradient masks, and if you're doing character stuff, it should work a bit more obviously than this. But yeah.
As far as
Go ahead.
As far as the context link, this is kind of moving on to a different question, but you said it likes to stay in that. I've definitely noticed that. Is there anything that you found, or perhaps it's even built in, I just don't know about it, to unlock that stability a little bit if you want it to make the motion a little bit crazier, other than maybe pumping the motion scale? Because I know that you can also mask that parameter, which is really fun.
Mm-hmm. When you say increase the motion, is it more
or loosen the stability, but within the context, so that perhaps there could be more because I've noticed
gotcha.
So it goes forward, then it goes back. It goes forward, it goes back. And this is definitely a limitation of it using Stable Diffusion 1.5 and the motion model itself, but there's not much forward temporal movement. It's basically like a loop of a moment in time.
Oh, if you're doing a loop, you're probably using this one, right? Looped uniform.
Yeah, and I know about the other the non-looped one, the standard one, but it still feels like it goes forward and back in time over that 16 frame.
I don't think you should see it going backward. If that's the case, there might be if you're using some other inputs that you're giving a control on it or something. By default, a lot of ComfyUI stuff, when it doesn't see it long enough, let's say you have only even prompt wise, if you don't have enough frames to fill out everything, instead of the way I do it in my nodes when I have control over that is I take whatever was the last input and just copy it to fill in the gaps. But most of the vanilla ComfyUI stuff, it instead repeats from the beginning. So that could be that, but that would be there. But if you want to loosen some of that control, or not control, but some of this look, let's remove all of the fancy stuff here. So this will sample faster. there is a thing called effect on this, and what the effect is here is you can kind of think as you have these extra temporal modules on what is a normal SD model. And what this does is you can take a weighted average of, okay, what would I actually get if stable diffusion was just running on its own versus here's what I get after I run these temporal modules. So first, let's get an idea of what that looks like without anything extra.
This is different from the scale multi-path.
Yeah, because scale is sort of like an attention trick where you multiply what is the K value, the key, and you're basically crossing your fingers and hope for the best. That's kind of how that part works. Okay, so here is that. It was a smoothish video, and I guess it decided to use this here. So it uses those weights. That's why it looks realistic. But if we, for example, change this to like 0.8, which means it's using whatever the result it originally got from for stable diffusion, that is multiplied by 0.2, added to what you get when you run AnimateDiff times 0.8. So in this case, it's very ugly, but you can tweak this value. And especially if you have control nets and stuff, you can sort of have an effect where it's not trying to be as smooth as you would normally have it, but you can get some little, make it sometimes look a bit more like a time lapse, make it look a bit more like claymation a little bit, because it's like more abrupt movements in places rather than it trying to like over smooth everything, where like every feature kind of fades into itself. This will change depending on what model you're using and stuff like that. So unfortunately, it's not like you just set this value to whatever, and let's make it do the animate look a bit more instead of realistic.
If you were to bring that effect scale above 1, it would be more stable.
Hypothetically, I mean, it's kind of like a thing, because mathematically what you're doing is if you have your effect greater than 1, it's subtracting what you would get from stable diffusion from the AnimateDiff result. So here's the 0.8 result, where it sort of does flickery stuff, and we can compare it to what 1 is. I can also show what happens if you go past 1. Just for science. Anyone who's used AnimateDiff, the unfortunate part of AnimateDiff is, I guess, in the process of turning the images to be temporally coherent, you lose a little bit of clarity you would normally have from an equivalent image of that resolution. So a lot of the times you can just improve quality if you just have another go after it where you just upscale it a little bit. The weights likely for AnimateDiff still seem to work at higher resolutions, but you typically want to start at a lower one so it doesn't go all crazy on you. So here's the effect of here's what happens when the effect goes down, where it doesn't try to be as temporally cohesive anymore. Actually, we can sync these up.
That's nice.
And here's what happens if you were to go higher. So if we're doing 0.2 increments, we'll do another 0.2 increment upwards, and we'll just make sure we don't lose this result, and we'll make it go. Oh, and of course, in the demo for the hooks, it doesn't only allow you to schedule by area. You can also do keyframes for changing the weights at different points of the sampling process. But anyway, here's what happened. You can see it's getting a little what's it called? Deep fried. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know how this works out mathematically, but technically getting what you would normally get from AnimateDiff, multiplying that by 1.2, and then subtracting what you would get from stable diffusion on its own, and multiplying that by 1 minus 1.2. So it's multiplying by 0.2. So it ends up subtracting a fifth of the strength of SD from it. I don't know what that means in practice. But as you can see, AD still does its thing. So
is this maskable, the effect?
Yes. So originally, that's why I added multival. Technically now in ComfyUI, it supports inputs where if you're writing, someone who's written a node before here, they understand what I'm trying to say now, is you can have a comma between types when you define a type. So you can have int comma mask, and that means in the UI, it will let you plug in an int or a mask in there. Since that wasn't a thing before, I came up with the multival system where you can just plug in a mask and it will basically take those values that were in the mask, multiply them by 1.2, and my code can still like handle the mask stuff. And another thing multival lets you do is do scaled mask, where let's say you don't want black to be 0. And if you're dealing with effect, you definitely don't want it to go down to 0. So what you can say instead is wherever it is black, that's going to mean 0.8. And wherever it is pure white, that means 1.0. And then all the gradients get put in between those values. Not well documented because it's hard to find time sometimes, but it's nice. And wherever multival is accepted in my node packs, this works. So like I also have stuff like you can schedule CFG to be at different steps, and I allow multival to be passed in there. So you can do things like using different CFG values on different areas of the image. So for example, if some weights you're applying with like weighted masks or like masked models, if one model or LoRA likes one CFG better than another, you can give those areas of the image different CFGs as well. That's not a ComfyUI feature, it's part of my node pack, but the multival inputs are pretty powerful if you're at the point where like, I know what I'm kind of trying to do, but there is no other way to kind of combine these values together during sample time. And then a scale, like I said, multiplies the attention. So technically, if you make the scale higher, it will try to make things move a bit more faster and chaotically, but not on purpose, just it's a trick of math. And if you go to like 0.8, movement pretty much ceases to exist. And then if you go any lower, it becomes a bit more artifacted without any movement. So it's not it's not a linear scale as like the effect would be, where it's taking a weighted average of two things.
I think I found the 0.8 to 1.2 range to be about where I played with when I was doing that scale.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's cool. That effect is super, super fun. I'll have to play around with that.
Yep. And going back to what I said about what was it? It was about keyframing the strengths. Because for example, some people they like to generate characters and stuff. And if someone has a character LoRA, oftentimes the outfits the characters wear are like baked into the LoRA. So like good luck like not making the character look like whatever the training sample was. But what you can do with the LoRA keyframing is start at a very low strength for the first few steps. So whatever model you're using or whatever other LoRAs you want to use initially, they can be stronger. So let's say you want the background to now look like your training set. So the first few steps will put that there. And then the next few steps, you scale that strength upwards. So now like the actual appearance of the character or the appearance of whatever subjects there are, they'll look more like they're supposed to, while tricking the model to still, the initial stuff for the stuff you want in the prompt, it will come out more naturally. I don't know if I explained it well, but like if one model gives you composition, that's great, but you want it to look in a different style, while the model that gives you the style you want sucks ass at composition, you can just start with one model and then slowly increase the strength of the other LoRA. And that is done, for example, the tutorial also includes this, but when you have your hook, you do the set hook keyframes, and there's multiple ways to schedule it. So this one, for example, here says, at the start of sampling, this has a strength of 0, so basically does nothing. By the end of sampling, it will do strength of 1. And then here it defines the bounds of where that happens. So here it says add start percent 0, which is the beginning of sampling, it will have this strength, and halfway through, it will already get to the strength end. And this determines how many like in between values there will be from the start to the end. If you want to see an example, you can look at the tutorial. A lot of these make more sense if there's like characters to be shown, but I didn't want all the demos to just be, anime characters. It's a little, I know we're in the SD space, trying to keep it a little professional. I come from a very professional background, so even bringing up anime in conversation was like very awkward to me, like at the Salty Eye conference. But I feel like I've now been ruined by this space, so I can just say it. Not even a blush appears on my face. Like it is what it is,
Nice, cool. Okay, so we are at 7:35 over here. I think I'm gonna wrap up the session, and then people can go downstairs, hang out for a little bit, get your stuff, and then we'll go to a bar nearby and get to know each other a little more.
Hell yeah! Take a shot for me while you're there.
All right, sounds good. Next time when you come to New York, we'll host you.
Hell yeah!
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. If anyone wants to contact me afterward I know one person said they want to talk about the hook some more. Feel free to do it. We can talk in the DMs.
I pinged you on Discord.
Yeah, what?
We have a green frog trying to add you, so that's really.
Gotcha. Let me look for the green frog.
Everyone should.
Kosink, where's the best place to reach you?
I technically have a Twitter. Haven't used it since high school, but it's there. I updated my profile picture. Discord would be the best way to talk, mainly because that's where I do most of the communication. If you message me on Twitter, I'll see a notification, so that's fine. Email, I guess, works. I don't know if I have an email anywhere, but
okay, Discord.
I think everyone here is a bit Discord coded, so that's fine with me.
Why won't you answer?
Cool. All right, go find Kosink on the Banadoko Discord. He'll be there answering all the questions about AnimateDiff all the time.
I've got a year and a half experience now answering questions about AnimateDiff. So
all right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for all the work that you do, and and also thank you for being here. Really appreciate it.
Yep, no problem. Hope this has been somewhat interesting. I didn't bore anyone to death. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it.
All right.
Thanks.
Have a good one.
Thank you.
See ya.
See ya.
Bye bye.